that I didn't tell, which you and I have talked about a little bit since, was, in the context of the criminal justice system, we often think of most people being guilty in that system, right? And that's, look, is there overcharging? Sure. Are there mitigating factors? Yes. Should some things maybe not be crimes at all? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We can go there, right? But by and large, if the majority of people being arrested and prosecuted in a society were innocent people, that system wouldn't work, right?
Right.
That society would come crashing down. So it's somewhat rare to get an absolutely innocent client in a criminal matter. I have had a few. I've had some cases of misidentification, and eyewitness identification is not nearly as reliable as most people think.
Right.
But I had a case a few years ago in a Western state that still sticks with me to this day, because it was a situation where a young woman who was a competitive female bodybuilder, not a pro, but a high-ranking national amateur, called me up one day, very upset, and said, "Rick, you got to help me." And so I'm like, "Sure, I help people all across the country. What's going on?" And she was like, "I have been charged with selling steroids that I never sold. I've never sold a steroid in my life." And so I'm like, "Okay, well, what's going on?" She goes, "Well, there was a guy who came to my gym, and she ran like a little small executive training gym, not a big commercial, certainly far from a hardcore muscle gym."
Right.
And she's like, "Guy came, called me up on the phone. He said he was interested in working out, joining the gym, maybe me putting him on a diet program." I said, "Sure." He asked me about steroids. I said, "No, I don't get involved in that." He asked me about supplements, and I told him, "Okay, I would recommend a multivitamin, and I'll give you a recommendation. I sell a multivitamin here. It's these big green pills. I will sell you a bottle for $20 when you come in tomorrow, and I'll write you up we'll get you started on a training program." He goes, "Great." So I'm like, "Okay, so what happened?" She goes, "Well, he came in the next day. I sat with him in my office. He asked me about training. He asked me about diet. He asked me about steroids. And again, I told him, look, look, it's part of high level bodybuilding, but I don't get involved with that." And then he said, "Well, what about those supplements that we talked about?" And so I took him out. I sold him $20 worth of multivitamins, and he went his way. And a couple of weeks later, the police came to my house and with a search warrant and ransacked my house. They found some steroids in my husband's side of the bedroom nightstand. And so they've charged me with selling 1 vial of testosterone from my gym. I never sold it. It was a bottle of multivitamins. Okay. So I said, well, let me see what I can do. So I call up the prosecutor, and the prosecutor was a young boy, young guy, probably in his 20s, starting his career. And I'm like, "What's going on? You're charging this woman with selling a steroid, and she's denying having ever sold anything." And he was like, "Well, she's not being honest with you. She's lying to you. She had a drug-related phone call with a confidential informant, because the guy on the phone was working for us as the government and working off his own steroid case. And so he called her up and he talked to her about steroids. And she told him that if he came in the next day, she'd sell him a vial of testosterone hidden in a bottle of multivitamins for $100. That phone call was not recorded. But the next day, when he showed up for the gym, he first met with a police agent who patted him down, gave him money, the $100 to buy the steroids, put a little wire on him, and sent him in with a recording device. And so that was recorded. And so the prosecutor says to me, look, she came, she met with him. He comes out a little while later. He brings to the police agent the multivitamin bottle. The agent opens up, takes off the lid, looks inside, and guess what's in there? Vial of testosterone. So we've got our dead to rights. So the drug call the day before, combined with the transaction from the gym and the steroids in the house, we're a 3 strikes and you're outlaw with those 3 transactions and calls. Well, she's looking at 10 years in prison.
What?
10 years in prison. He goes, now look, I know she's got no prior record. She seems like a good person, but I'll tell you what, if she pleads guilty to a felony, I'll give her probation. She'll get straight probation. Not a day in prison, but she's taking a felony. So I go back to her and I'm like, tell her the situation. She goes, it's a lie. I never saw such I never had a vial of testosterone. The steroids in the house were my husband's. There was no talk about drugs in that initial phone call. I am fighting this case. I didn't do it. I'll take 10 years in prison, but I'm not going to plead guilty to something I didn't do. And I respected her for that. So there were 2 things that helped in this case. So one was, in some states, you are allowed to depose the prosecution witnesses in advance of a trial.
Okay.
Not every state. This happened to be one of the states that allowed it. So I was able to set up a meeting where I could actually interrogate and question the confidential informant and the agent, the cop who was on the case. The other thing is that every state allows for discovery, right? So you are entitled to understand what the evidence is against your client. So things like that recording gets provided to the defense counsel. So I listened to that tape of that transaction because I wanted to make sure that what I was hearing was right. And I had my partners listen to it. I passed it around because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't hearing something that wasn't accurate.
Right.
And so we set up a date, got on a plane. I flew out there to this western state. The little town was up in the mountains, drove all the way up into the mountains, show up, meet with her the night before. I got local counsel because I wasn't admitted in that state. Local counsel, good lawyer, older guy, very knowledgeable about the way things worked in that little courthouse. Spent the meeting the night before trying to talk her into taking a plea.
Right.
And saying, you're going to go to prison for 10 years. But I believed in her. I really did. And I thought I had a good case. And so we went in the next day. I show up and I walk in and the prosecutor's there. He says, oh, I got bad news. I go, what's the matter? He goes, well, the confidential informant had an emergency with his family. He's not available. So he's not here today. We can reschedule this for another day. I'm like, this is not a woman of great means. She's an ordinary person. She can't. I'm not going to fly out here again. I'm here now. That's it. So he goes, well, we can do it in a couple of weeks. I'm like, look, if I'm going to do that, I'll come back in like 2 months. I got a busy schedule. I got cases all over the country. I'm not going to be able to do that. He goes, well, the problem is we have a time limit on the probation deal. So if she doesn't take the probation deal in 30 days, that's lost. So you could question the witnesses, but you're not going to get the deal back. And you're going to be ultimately going to trial. And if she loses, she's going to prison for 10 years. So I'm like, okay, what are my options here? He goes, well, I could probably get the guy on the telephone. I said, okay, you got the agent here? Yeah. Get him on the phone. First time I've ever cross-examined a witness over the phone,
Yeah.
But necessity is the mother of invention, right? So
Right.
it was the best option because I didn't want to lose the possibility of the probation if things went south.
Sure.
So even though I felt pretty confident, and I felt confident I could do what I needed to do over the phone. So I questioned the cop was there, and I found out that he let the guy drive his own car the 3 or 4 blocks from where they met to where the gym was, which is kind of like not best practice, right?
Right.
Because you always want you want to avoid the possibility of a sneaky snitch. Somebody's going to pull a fast one, right?
Right.
So he didn't do that. I got him to admit he didn't strip search him. He didn't go in his socks. He didn't look in all the other places that theoretically you could have hidden a vial of testosterone.
Right.
So, and I got that the guy was working off his own steroid trafficking case where he had been given a deal where if he could set up 3 people, he would get a misdemeanor. Like he had set up one like 8 months earlier. So I figured he's probably getting a lot of pressure from the prosecutor to say, look, if you can't find 2 more people to set up, you know, you're not getting your deal. You're not getting your plea deal. So he was desperate to try to find somebody. And if you looked at her, tremendous person, but she looked like a bodybuilder. She looked like there was low-hanging fruit. So if you're sitting there in a courtroom and a jury were to see a bodybuilder on a steroid case, you kind of have a few strikes against you to begin with, right? The assumptions, you know, they could see and probably would believe that she was at a minimum a heavy steroid or a steroid user, right?
Right.
So you don't get to elite bodybuilder status, you know, realistically.
No.
So I get him on the phone and I start asking him a bunch of questions. And ultimately, he admits that he wasn't strip searched. He admits he was working off the case. And he claims that they went in, that he was in the office with her, that she said the things she said about steroids, but that when he said, oh, what about the supplements, he was referring to the steroids. And that when he got to the counter, she sold him the bottle of vitamins with the vial of testosterone inside, and that he paid her $100, not the $20 of the vitamin bottle. Okay. So I said, well, what did you do afterward? Did you take that? You now had what you claim are the drugs in this bottle. And you claim that this had the what you were sent in to get. So you took it right outside to the cop, right? Oh, yeah. Because you wouldn't have gone somewhere else first, right?
Right.
Well, no. Because you understand basic chain of evidence. You need to take that evidence and bring it right to the cop. That's what he told you, right? And that's what you did? I had to go to the bathroom. I'm like, really? You had to go to the bathroom? You had to go to the bathroom so badly that you couldn't wait just a few minutes to take this precious evidence that you claim you had to the police officer? He goes, no, I had to go so bad. I'm like, number 1 or number 2? He goes, number 1. I go, all right. So your bladder was so full that you needed to stop at this bathroom, and you went into that bathroom before bringing the evidence to the cop. Yes, yes. And you went in, that it was a 1-person bathroom. Yes. And you closed the door and you locked the door. Yes. Nobody in there but you, right? Yes. What he didn't realize was that the tape that he was wearing was running the whole time, right up until he saw the cop. So when I listened to that tape, what I realized was, yeah, I heard the door close. I heard the lock go on. I heard his keys placed on the sink. I heard cellophane crinkling as he took off the cellophane that closed the lid of the vitamin bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I heard tablets, big tablets, hitting the porcelain of the bowl one after another as he scooped out enough to be able to fit that vial that he had hidden somewhere on his person into that bottle.
Wow.
What I didn't hear the whole time was a single drop of number 1 hitting that toilet.
Fucker.
And when I confronted him with this, he was like, well, I don't like the way this is going. I said, I wouldn't think you would, because there's a name for it. You know what that is? It's called perjury. That's just what you've done. Well, I want to talk to my lawyer. I want to talk to my lawyer. And he hangs up the phone. At this point, the prosecutor is as white as a sheet. And he looks at me and he goes, would you take a misdemeanor? I said, elect. I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. You're going to dismiss all charges against this woman who was falsely accused under your watch. And I'm going to talk her out of suing you, the police department, and the DA's office for what you've done. And he's like, I can live with that. And that was the end of the case. And she then relocated, but it was a scary thing. And I've written a few legal articles about it, about what not to do if you are a police officer and you have a confidential informant and you're arranging a transaction. You don't let him drive his own car. You do a full search of him because he can't be trusted.
Right.
He didn't know also, and I had as my ace in the hole, was I had asked him, when you did this transaction, it was for $100, right? Yes, that was the price of the steroid, right? Yes.
Right.
She didn't ring it up in the cash register, right? Well, no. I mean, you don't record drug transactions, right?
No.
He goes, no, of course not. What he didn't realize was I had the time-coded receipt from the cash register. $20. $20.
Wow.
So it was a great lesson in, how the system can fail us, and it can from time to time. But it's also something that stays with me because I love what I do. I have the opportunity to help people who otherwise might have gotten bad legal advice, might have been coerced into a plea, might have not understood what to do or had the wherewithal to be able to stand up to the pressure of the government. The government has to prove somebody guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They've got the burden of proof. But in the real world, the government has huge advantages. And the defense lawyer is kind of up against the awesome power of the government. The defendant is the little guy or woman. And so I love the opportunity to be on their side. I was a prosecutor, as you know, for 5 years, and I never prosecuted a steroid case. I prosecuted, people who hurt other people physically, economically, sexually, those kind of things. And I felt good about that. But I couldn't be happier with what I do, Dylan. I love it. I'm very blessed to do what I do.
Absolutely. I love it. The audacity, though, to say, would you take a misdemeanor after hearing it? That's the worst part of the story to me.